So we're finishing up our day in Austin. We have another day tomorrow. We're going to do some outlying sites. Today we focused on the campus and then some of the financial districts in here at the Capitol. We're ending it in the place where the sausage gets made, I guess, right. And a place where Lynn has spent a lot of time doing her testimony.
A lot of testimonies on bad bills, and we had a really bad one recently. Governor Greg Abbott signed 2 bills for blockchain. And so, it's pitched as this great digital currency, digital wallet, or stored. It's where the digital currency is stored. And so everyone's on board with this. I think it's so great. The legislators that brought it there have also worked in social impact bonds and education bad bills. So it's the same people. And so go ahead, you were...
No, but the thing that's interesting is that on the blockchain it's being pitched as sort of something that would maybe feed people who were interested in more market-oriented solutions, or people who were framing it from a more conservative standpoint, not realizing perhaps in the broader...
conservative legislators, and the governor is also conservative. But it's interesting because he talks about not putting... he actually talks about penalizing companies that force the vaccine passports.
Oh.
But it's interesting because the vaccine passports are going to come on blockchain. So he passes these 2 bills for blockchain, and then he says, we're not going to let companies demand a vaccine passport, and they're going to do it through a digital wallet on blockchain.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I didn't realize is, like, when I was doing some research about Austin, is that IBM, who is a huge player in the space of the blockchain space and supply chains and also the vaccine credentials, is the 3rd largest employer in the city, which is huge, right? And so when all of this hit...
IBM was there for Hitler and the machine,
Hollerith cards. Yeah.
Hollerith
and
cards.
Apartheid, which South Africa, which in some ways the geofencing is even more apt in that scenario.
But as far as the Workforce Commission, that's tied in with the blockchain, and that's part of the reason why we're here, is that the Workforce Commission gets these grants, and they get federal dollars and state dollars, and they go into the communities and talk about reskilling and upskilling, and you were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, well, we were trying to figure out where we would put I've been carrying around all day a bag of rocks, which I use to weight down my little art project with my blockchain, don't blockchain children, nature, or the poor. So we figured we wanted to just leave a parting message at the state capitol, and as we were looking around for a good spot, we saw the Workforce Commission. So we thought this is the perfect place, because really they're going to keep people in debt and managed on the one side through biosurveillance and the biosensor data that will be tracked on your health passport, but on the other side it will be your lifelong learning. And that is very central to what we've been focused on competency-based education, sometimes called mastery-based or proficiency-based. But this idea that you will demonstrate that you have accomplished some task, and that you will get a little stackable badge in your locker. And that all of this real-time data aggregation feeds the predictive analytics about you, about your school district, about your city, into these larger schemes, these sort of wargaming schemes about what the future is going to be, and then they pull your data into the singularity, which is, incredible.
That's happening through, so the same governor appointed the TEA commissioner, and he's doing all of that with machine learning and predictive analytics. They've taken student data from 16 million different records of student data, testing scores and things, and feeding it into this. It's actually a partnership with Microsoft, Azure, DataKind, the Texas Education Agency, the Commit Partnerships. All of these groups are working together doing this machine learning and predictive analytics, so they can anticipate student outcomes, and they can do impact investing and gamble.
That's the bet.
It's the betting against their futures, and people are like, what are you talking about? But they put it out there, they brag about it, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the same people pitching the social impact bonds are the ones that push the bill through for blockchain. The bill's through for blockchain.
Yeah.
Like Representative Tan Parker, he was a social impact bond guy who took math software and they have investors that'll put the money in up front, and then they'll track the kids through education technology, math software. And then if their math scores improve at the end, and their investors get a payout. But they leave out the part that's Moscow oil and Texas oil.
The kids befriending the little magic genie that's giving them digital hints on their math program.
Yeah, exactly. And so who knows who's collecting what kind of data on these kids. And it's not just academic data. There's other stuff going on in there too.
Yeah. Well, and the idea of like labor, I mean, I guess I didn't realize it, not being an economist and not really taking a lot of economics classes, but it's really purely like math. I mean, most of it is mathematical modeling. And so now that they've got these supercomputers, and I mean, this goes back, at least 10, 15 years, Austin has this major like Texas supercomputing center, which is outside of the city where we're going to try to go tomorrow. And they've been doing modeling of labor projections and education for quite some time using these high like level supercomputers. And, as parents, like you never imagine that your kid's going to end up as in a math equation, like run like certainly not for hedge fund betting, but it just seems inhumane. Like, why would you need to do that? Why would we need to have that level? Because, honestly, right now I don't think the economy is working that great for most people. There's a lot of wealth and power in a few hands, and most people are scrambling to try to keep up. And
that got worse during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of the legislators that pushed those bills through, their kids are immune to this because they're in private schools, and so they're not doing that.
So far.
I mean, they are doing it, I'm sure, to some degree, but
I'm
not
just
at
saying the
level.
vouchers.
Oh, right, that's true.
Because you guys have been speaking about vouchers in the past,
There's
right?
a lot of every legislative session they push vouchers, and right now we're in a third special session, I think, and so they're going to push vouchers again. They usually target a vulnerable population like special needs kids in order to push the vouchers through, but they have not succeeded thus far, but they very well could this time.
Well, and I think in many respects people think that the vouchers it's school choice, and that you're going to take this voucher and use it for private school tuition or parochial school tuition, even though the voucher is never really enough to cover all but a tiny fraction. So people who are truly in difficult financial circumstances are not a great audience for that, because you still have to pay more on top of that, the voucher generally.
The private schools are too expensive. You can't afford to do that because the money's not enough to cover. So where does the difference come from?
Yeah, but in the end, they're going to come up with digital vouchers. That's my guess, is that the education vouchers will be on blockchain, and that's something that's actually been promoted by the Heritage Foundation, and they've talked about like, oh, we should be using this digital money, these digital payment systems, and all of this innovative technology.
So the idea is that money follows the child, but they could do it on a blockchain wallet, and so it would be, they'd say, it's yours to send wherever you want to, take the money and send it to a private school or spend it however you want it. But there will be strings attached to that, and I think that a lot of these, freedom, like the conservatives or the homeschool families, I don't think some of them realize it, and the other half, they don't have any clue. They just say, I want to take the money. But there is a group that would say, no, I don't care what form it comes, I'm not doing it, because they don't want the government involved in their school and any strings attached. But there's the other half of them would say, yes, I want the money.
Right.
They will take it, and it's an access point to access kids that would not normally be accessible because they've been homeschooling.
Right. Yeah, and there's probably going to be a lot more like oversight in the homeschooling.
Right. If you dangle the money carrot, they may.
Well, and there's homeschooling families that are pursuing like a very traditional route, but through the expansion of virtual schools and cyberschooling over the past, 5 to 7 years, there's many people who are schooling at home but using an online ed tech program in either full or large part, as a supplement to their curriculum or exclusive. Yeah. And so, those companies, the online education companies, will stand to benefit from these vouchers. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is that it's very likely that many of your civic institutions, that traditional homeschooling families like sit at the kitchen table with books and paper kind of families, when they would go to the library, that the library is going to start offering programs that are tied to QR codes and tied to impact data and tied to these vouchers. and the maker spaces will be the same, and probably some of the sports leagues or some of the recreation. So you will be able to fulfill your competency-based education in any number of community-based organizations, but the cost will likely be your metadata comes back so that they can verify the impact. And then in that way, everything is going to be aligned to the global standards, and everything will be tracked and measured. And so all of the things that families have come to rely on will be incorporated into the larger system. So while I've always come as advocating for public schools, at this point, AI is coming for all the kids. They're coming for the kids in Catholic schools, they're coming for the kids in private schools, cyber schools, charter schools, everybody.
And our friend Lynn Taylor would always say that's how they're going to do it, is through, eventually they will have some sort of Title I portability.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that would come in through blockchain.
Well, and it's weighted funding. Because I don't know if they have that here, but in Pennsylvania. So, and again, on the surface, it makes sense, right? If there's a child that has additional needs, whether they need support with language learning, where they need special education services, where they are, are come from a low-income background and they need some additional support, sure. Like, nobody's saying that those kids should not have those additional resources, but it's always that money is going to follow the child. And what people are not realizing is that the future of education is this Pokemon Go, where if bricks and mortar regular public schools continue to exist, there are going to be more drop-in centers where you have a check-in with your caseworker, right, about your mental health and your health status, and by the way, like what your social emotional status is and your cognitive skills on your pathway that's been assigned to this planned economy. Which comes back to the workforce. And you were saying before about the community colleges.
Yeah, and the community colleges are connected with the whole ecosystem that is going to impose the blockchain credentials on the public schools and the community colleges and beyond. But that's an access point, is through the schools, because it's a captive market of public school kids, and those students who are then routed to the community colleges, they entered this agreement with Greenlight Credentials, which is a blockchain company, and it's a for-profit company that has a pretty sweet deal with our public schools.
Yeah. Well, and the whole premise behind a learning ecosystem and taking out bricks and mortar schools is the idea that there are really no grades, there are no degrees, you just keep getting badges, right? You just keep getting badges. And so in many districts, across the country, that because of the cost of four-year higher education, a lot of students are doing dual enrollment community college. So a lot of the pilot competency-based education states are saying, we don't want to see 11th and 12th graders in our schools. Like, get out of here and go somewhere else.
Yeah, because a lot of them have to make room for the pre-K now that they have mandatory pre-K, which is another access point. They need that space for the pre-K students, so then they float these billion-dollar bonds at the community college level, and so then that frees up space in the high schools, and then they use the money to build more buildings and open it up to the students in the colleges. That's another thing going on.
Yeah. There's a lot of different elements of this, but I mean, the one thing I want to mention the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, because that was passed under Obama, and actually it aligns with what I was talking about with Mark Tucker and the National Center on Education and the Economy, which goes back, he was appointed by the Carnegie Corporation, so it goes back to the early 1990s. And Mark Tucker had written a letter when the Clintons came into office to Hillary. It's called the Dear Hillary letter. And I have to say, as someone who was sort of like liberal left, politically homeless, like it was really embraced by the conservatives, but they were right about it. And it was later read into the congressional.
Were speaking out about it?
Well, about like the standardization like the dumbed down education, and so in calling out this for being a problem. And so actually I can't remember, but there was someone, I believe from Colorado, who read it into the congressional record. So then at that point it became a primary source document, not just hearsay.
It was a blueprint.
And if you look back, it's exactly what's happening, but essentially saying that we are going to come up with an apprenticeship model. And again, none of us are saying that everybody has the same like kinds of gifts or needs to attain the same like levels of credentials to succeed, right? And it's not that, but their apprenticeship model is essentially going to be chasing these badges and never getting really good employment, because you're going to be working against everybody around the world through a soft robot for the lowest wage, and then getting the next skill and the next skill, because the AI will keep speeding the world up.
So, I mean, as far as like all of that is overwhelming, but really it's a simple solution to stop it at the local level. And so when you see these deals coming through, whether it's at the state level with blockchain, sound the alarms. That's what we're doing right now, saying, you know what, we don't want our kids on blockchain. We don't want them to be traded like that. And the way it's pitched as this solution for data breaches, and they say, oh, you own your own data. Well, that sounds great, but I don't think people see the unintended, or maybe they're intended, but they're for many it's unintended consequences. They haven't even thought about this as being a bad thing, that you would put kids on these locker in their everything, their mental health, their transcripts, their diplomas, their credentials, everything being on this supposed convenient wallet, but it's far more sinister than that.
And then the question for me too is these planned economies, right? Regional economies, regional workforce. That was what the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act was to say that different regions would pick 6 to 8 focused areas for their economy. And the problem in Philadelphia, where I'm from, southeastern Pennsylvania, the top growth jobs were jobs that paid like $12 an hour, most of them. And you can't raise a family and live in any kind of stable way in a major US city for $12 an hour. It just doesn't make sense. So why would we create an economy that doesn't work for anybody? I mean, except for the people who are the impact investors. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's a very lucrative model. And then, of course, we talked about vaccine passports. So that's the other sinister piece of the blockchain movement, is that ultimately we will have to prove that we have been vaccinated, and they will do that through that's where it will be stored on blockchain with your healthcare records. And in order to be able to buy, sell, and travel, all of those things, or even go to a concert, you would have to show your vaccine passport on blockchain, which would probably be done through a QR code, and eventually will be probably in your skin or somewhere in your body.
So blockchain goes in a lot of different directions. Mm-hmm. So today we talked about
not just Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, it's far greater.
Essentially, it's cybernetic government, with eventually maybe government just being AI. Which, as I keep saying, Lynn, these smart contract layers on blockchain, if people don't understand what's really going on, it would be
because we didn't try.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we are trying. We're trying really hard. So, all right, done for the day.